Today we're going to do the Unit 5 study guide, the geometry study guide. The first two problems are asking whether they're congruent or similar, the pairs of triangles. So I'm going to look at the first pair and I see that I have numbers on the outside, so that tells me I'm probably looking for similarity. And I'm going to check for side-side-side similarity because I have no angles congruent, so I could not use angle-angle or side-angle-side similarity. So I'm going to take the first pair, 10 over 20, excuse me, 10 over 20, which it reduces to 1/2. Okay, the next pair, 12 over 24, which also reduces to 1/2. And I'm looking at the last pair, 5 over 10, and that does reduce to 1/2 also. So since my scale factor is 1/2 and all three of them have that same ratio, they're in proportion, which means I can say yes by side-side-side similarity. The second pair of triangles is one triangle divided into two. I have two congruent sides here. I have two congruent angles here, and it already shows that this is congruent to itself by the reflexive property. So I know that I have a side, an angle, and a pair of sides. So I can say side, side, side. And you don't have to say congruency. That is congruent. So next we have three triangles with solving for a variable. So I have 8x and x plus 9 here. And I can see that this is going to be mid-segment because I have both of these sides divided in half. So that means this piece, the mid-segment, is half of this piece. So in other words, the base equals 2 times the mid-segment. So the base is 8x, and that equals 2 times my mid-segment, which is x plus 9. So I have 8x equals 2x plus 18, and when I subtract 2x, I have 6x equals 18, and then you divide by 6, so x equals 3. The next one would be an equilateral triangle because all three angles are congruent, which means they all equal 60 degrees. So that means 12x must equal 60. When I divide by 12, x is going to be 5. The third one I know is an isosceles triangle because it has one pair of congruent sides. Since the sides are congruent, the base angles are also congruent. So I can say 3x minus 1 equals 7x. Subtract 3x. Oh, excuse me. Before you do this problem, change this to plus 1. So instead of 3x minus 1, that should be 3x plus 1. I'm going to tell the sub to tell you that when you do the study guide. So this is plus. So I subtract 3x, and I get 1 equals 4x. Divide by 4. X is going to be equal to 1/4. We go to number 6, and I have a triangle with mid-segments here. I know they're mid-segments because each side is divided in two. So if I look, I say which one's shorter. It's asking me to find out which one's shorter, A, B, or BC. So AB would be half of this base. So AB is 8. And BC would be half of this base, so that would be 5. So which one's shorter? Well, AB is 8 and BC is 5. So BC is shorter since 5 is less than 8. Which would be a shorter distance? Going from A to B to C. Well, here's A, B, C. So I'm going 8, then 5 miles. So from A to B to C equals 8 plus 5, or 13 miles. And then A to X to C. Well, I know A to X is half of this side since these are congruent. So A to X must be 5. And X to C is going to be half of this side, so that's 8. So I know this is 5 plus 8, which is 13 miles also. So your answer would be neither is shorter, since they are equal distance. And you need to show your work on your separate sheet of paper also. Don't forget. Don't just give me the answer without showing work on a piece of paper. Your next one, number 8, I have 2 horizontal lines that are parallel, because it tells me that. So I can mark those parallel, which means these are same side interior angles that are supplementary, since that's the property of parallel lines with a transversal. So I know supplementary means they're added together. I take the sum of the 2 angles, and that sum must equal 180. Combine like terms, so I have 7x plus 30 equals 180. Subtract 30. 7x equals 150, and x equals 150 divided by 7. And x is going to equal 21.4. Okay, so number 8 is finished. Let's go to number 9. I have Irene, who's got a mirror on the ground. We did this for the warm-up on Tuesday before I left. And then her distance from the mirror is 4 feet. The tree is 18 feet from the mirror. Irene is 5.5 feet tall. How tall is the tree? You're going to set up 2 similar triangles, or you have 2 similar triangles, so you can set up a proportion. 5.5 over the height of the tree, which is x, must be equal to 4 over 18 feet, the distance from the mirror. And you do 5.5 times 18, and that's going to equal 99, and 4x on the other side. When I divide by 4, I get x equals 24.75 feet. Now, if I wanted to change that to feet and inches, you could say 0.75 feet. 0.75 feet times 12 inches, and that would be 9 inches. So this is also 24 feet 9 inches if you wanted to put it into feet and inches. That's just an FYI. You can leave it just like this for the test. Okay, so number 10, I have 5 arcs I need to find the measure of. So remember, we have to remember how they're named. Yx is a minor arc, so I want the distance from y to x, or the measure from y to x. Well, I can see I have a semicircle here, so that adds up to 180. So this would be 180 minus the other piece of that semicircle, or 60, and that gives me 120 degrees. Then I need to get zy, which is also a minor arc, so it's just this arc here. Well, let's see, this is also a semicircle from w to z to y. So if I take the other piece and subtract it out, I get 30 degrees. And then zx is also a minor arc, so from z to x is the combination of the 2 arcs I just found. So I add those together and I get 150. Now I have 2 major arcs coming up because they have 3. They could be semicircles. Let's see. Y, z, x. So I'm getting this arc here. Well, from here to w, from y to z to w is 180, and add 60. So 180 plus 60 is 240 degrees. And then the last one, ZWY. ZWY is everything but ZY. So I can subtract ZY out. Well, ZY was 30, so 360 minus 30 is 330. So that's number 10. 11, I have a tangent, because it says if they appear to be tangent, they are tangent. So that makes this a right angle because I have a tangent and a radius. which makes this the right triangle. So I can use our favorite theorem, Pythagorean's theorem. So my legs are 9 and 12. 9 squared plus 12 squared equals x squared. So I have 81 plus 144. And 81 plus 144 is 225. So I have 225 is equal to x squared. Well, I don't want x, I want, or x squared, I want x. So I have to take the square root of both sides, which makes x equal to 15. And it says just to find the value of the variable, so I don't have to do any more than that. The next one is using the inscribed angles, which we learned on Tuesday. I know that the arc is the measure of the arc is twice as large as the measure of the angle, and the angle is 50 degrees, which makes the arc 100 degrees. That's the arc that the inscribed angle intercepts. But I need z. Well, looking at this, I can see this whole thing is a semicircle. So I can do 180 minus 100. So z is going to be 80. Find the length of the arc intercepted by the shaded sector. Well, I'm given the unshaded sector. So I have to subtract 70 degrees. To get the measure of this arc, I have to do 360 minus 70, which equals 290. So the measure is 290. And I also need the radius, which is 7. So for 13, I need the length, which means I'm using circumference. And for 14, I'm using area, so I'm doing pi r squared. Okay, so for 13, I'm still doing the measure, 290 over 360, times the circumference. So 2 pi r, r is 7, so that'd be 14r. And that's going to equal 203 over 18 pi feet. Remember, you do 290 times 14 divided by 360, math, enter, enter. So again, I have 290 over 360, but for 14 I need area, so I'm using pi r squared. So r is 7, r squared would be 49, and this is going to equal 1,421 over 36 pi feet squared. 15. You have a dog on a leash attached to a pole in the ground. So let's pretend this is the pole. And here's the leash. Here's our dog. Here. I know, I'm not an artist. Woof, woof. Okay, so there's your dog. Now the dog can walk anywhere in the circle within the distance of the leash from his pole. So basically he can walk in this whole area. So in order to find the area that he can play, that he can move around, I need to find the area of this circle. Well, since the leash is 12 feet long, my radius is 12 feet. So how do I find the area of a circle? It's just pi r squared. So I do pi times 12 squared, or 144 pi. If you want to put it into actual measurements, you can multiply that together, and that would be 452.4 feet squared. I don't care which way you leave that at this point, as long as you're getting there. And then 16 is a proof. I'm given that these two segments are parallel. It's marked in the picture, and these two angles are congruent. I need to see what my given information is. So I'm going to write in for 1, QS is parallel to RT, and angle R is congruent to angle S. You should always be able to get that first one. Number 2, so that's number 1. I might have to make these bigger than the picture here in order to write on this board. Alternate interior angles are congruent. Well, alternate interior angles makes me think I'm thinking about parallel lines. And I have two parallel lines and a transversal. So the transversal cuts right here. So I know my alternate interior angles are here and here and here and here. Looking, I'm trying to prove QTS, this angle is congruent to this angle. So I want to use these two angles as my congruent angles in my proof. So I'm going to say angle SQT is congruent to angle RTQ. So that's your number 2. 3, reflexive property, is just that segment that they share, that the two triangles share. So number 3 would be QT is congruent to QT. 4, since it's angle, angle, side, that means I'm showing two triangles are congruent. So I can say SQT is congruent to triangle RTQ. That's by angle, angle, side similarity or congruence. And then number 5, corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Remember, that is CPCTC. And we're going to use this as our statement. It's always the prove statement is always your last statement. Okay, so if you can at least get to number 4, not worrying about the CPCTC, that's enough to be able to do the test. And the test is going to be even less information to fill in. So don't panic if you didn't get all of that. If you can at least get alternate interior angles and reflexive property and know your congruencies, you'll be all right. Okay, go ahead and go back to anything you need to go back over. Pause, think about what you need to do, and study the things you don't know. Good luck.